conference that's here in town that a few people might have been at. I'll just give everyone a second to sit down. I know the hummus is really good. It is not going anywhere. We ordered the largest amount of hummus I think possible. So. Everybody's in place? Okay. Welcome everyone. My name is Jen Stojkovic. I'm the Executive Director of sf.citi. We are San Francisco's Tech Trade Association. We are thrilled to be hosting this debate tonight. We have a number of really great partners that have helped to put it on. So I'm going to bring them up to say a few short words as well as go over the debate and the ground rules for tonight. So first and foremost, thank you to our host sponsor, Lyft. Look at this cool office. Anything that is okay in my books, as well as our event sponsor, Hustle. Did everyone get a text? Everyone got one of those texts? I think Kia from Hustle sent it out. So that's another one of our fantastic sponsors for tonight. Thank you to the candidates who were able to make it out. I know that you guys are very, very busy, so we appreciate it. There is candidate tables over in the corner, so they will be here throughout the night if you want to learn more about their campaigns. And thank you to everybody who was able to come out on this very, very busy Wednesday. With that being said, I am going to turn it over to Alex Rosenthal, who's the Vice President of Compliance at Lyft, who's going to say a few words.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Lyft. We're excited you could join us this evening to meet the candidates for District 6 Supervisor. Lyft is a District 6 company from our humble origins on Brandon and Clara Streets to today on Berry Street. We have grown up in this district. Currently, we have 1,800 employees in this building. Civic engagement is very important to Lyft, as many of you know. Just yesterday, we encouraged millions of drivers and passengers to register to vote as a part of National Voter Registration Day. And we are working with partners to provide 50% off rides to encourage voter turnout on Election Day. Next week, yes, that's right, let's hear it for that. Next week is Community Week here at Lyft. The entire company is encouraged to participate in volunteer and service opportunities in the community in which our offices are, including here in District 6, we're serving food at Glide Memorial. We are volunteering with the Larkin Street Youth Services, and we will be at the ARC, the Learning Center for Adults with Disabilities. Like all of you, we have seen firsthand the challenges facing our district and all of San Francisco around homelessness, affordability, public health, and public safety. But Lyft is also proof of this district's possibilities. Next, I would like to introduce Kia Calderoff-Lane, where's Kia, with Hustle, our co-sponsor for today.
Hi everyone. Raise your hand if you got a text from myself or Tyler Bressinger over there. Awesome. Thank you very much, and thank you especially if you texted me back. My name is Kia. I'm the Chief of Staff at Hustle, and I also lead our Government and Public Affairs on the West Coast. We're really proud to be here as a sponsor today and a member of sf.citi for these three awesome candidates who we're really excited to work with one of them as they grow in their role as Supervisor of District 6. Hustle is a peer-to-peer text messaging platform that enables organizations like Lyft or campaigns, political campaigns, to reach their members, their supporters, their community members at scale by driving, building relationships and driving action. So thank you so much for coming and being here tonight to listen to these incredible candidates, and feel free to check us out in the back over there. Thank you.
Okay, now I have the very fun job of going through the ground rules for tonight. Has anybody been to a debate yet this year? Okay, all right, we got some civic-minded folks here. So, we are going to have 2-minute questions for each of the candidates to answer. We do have a timekeeper in the front who will be strictly monitoring the candidate's time. We also have 30-second rebuttals to each question available if the candidates see fit. We know that some of you have your favorite candidate here tonight. However, we will not be doing audience applause because we have a live stream. So we want to make sure that everybody can hear. So instead, we're going to use happy hands. Yeah! Everybody knows happy hands? Come on, this is San Francisco. And if you were in disagreement, we're going to use thumbs down. Okay, so everybody quickly, happy hands. Woo! And thumbs down. Awesome. So tonight is going to be live streamed through Facebook Live and recorded and up on our Facebook afterwards if you want to take a look. We also want to make sure that you have a chance to ask the candidates some questions. Many of you already submitted some really, really great questions through Eventbrite when you signed up, so we were able to curate some of those. The Facebook live stream also has Q&A available, as well as using the Twitter hashtag InnovateD6. So we'll also be monitoring the sf.citi Twitter account. And lastly, if you want to go old school, paper and pen, we do have some pads available. So without further ado, let's introduce the candidates. First, let's bring up Christine Johnson. Let's go all the way to the left here. And secondly, we're going to bring up Sonja Trauss. And as many of you are probably aware, Matt Haney unfortunately is not able to be here tonight. However, we do have Aaron Haney who's going to come up and say a few words on his behalf. And lastly, we're going to bring up our moderator, Cory Weinberg, right over here. He's a reporter in San Francisco for The Information.
Yeah.
Is anybody subscribe to The Information? Dude, there is some really good stuff in there. Every time you guys send a newsletter, it's like the juiciest information. Well, I guess that's why it's called The Information. And Cory previously was a reporter for the San Francisco Biz Times, where he covered housing policy and commercial real estate. So before we get started, I'm going to hand this over to just say a few words from Haney's team.
Sure. So thanks everyone for being here tonight. Matt is so apologetic that he can't be here. He's extremely sick with the flu, so I'm here to pass a message on to you all from him, and we hope he gets better quickly so that he can be at the next debate and be here himself to actually tell you guys his points of view. I'm going to read the message and then get out of here. I'm in the middle of a death penalty case, so I wish I could stay and hear the rest of the debate, but if you can, just picture Matt up here speaking the words to you. Good evening, everyone. I'm so sorry I can't be there tonight. I am sick with the flu and unfortunately unable to participate. As much as I'd like to be there, I don't think it's fair to any of you for me to be in the room as sick as I am. I really appreciate you all coming out and thank sf.citi, Hustle and Lyft for putting this event together. District 6 is one of the most innovative and creative areas in the world. As the supervisor for this district, it would be my responsibility and commitment to always seek opportunities to harness this innovation for our collective benefit and to solve our toughest problems. I've talked to thousands of D6 voters over the past year, including out at the tech shuttle stops most mornings. And here's what I've learned. San Francisco is creative, well-resourced, and compassionate, but we still have tremendous challenges. We must act swiftly to build more housing so that we can continue to grow in an inclusive and sustainable way. We need to revamp and redesign our failing shelter, mental health, and addiction treatment systems. And we need bigger and bolder action on transportation to take us into the 21st century. For all of these challenges, we are going to have to work together closely with our technology and innovation sector. As a school board member, when I found out that less than 2% of students were enrolled in computer science courses, I authored the first policy in the country that expands computer science and coding education to all students and all schools. I served as an adjunct faculty member at the Stanford Design School, teaching about how human-centered design can help our institutions innovate. I believe that our government should be deeply rooted in the real lived experiences and needs of our residents and be designed to learn, change, and adapt when it isn't meeting those needs. For the past 5 years, I served as the policy director at the Dream Corps, where I worked alongside Van Jones to innovate on our country's toughest challenges: criminal justice, economic inequality, and building a pipeline for low-opportunity youth to enter the tech sector. I'm proud to be endorsed by a broad coalition, including Senator Kamala Harris, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, the majority of the Board of Supervisors, all of my school board colleagues, the teachers, fighters, nurses, and the SF Democratic Party. Too often in our city's politics, we end up dividing into different camps, pointing fingers at each other, trying to score points rather than solve problems. I hope that if I am elected as the next supervisor of District 6, we can work together to move beyond that. We have serious challenges. Our city's residents need us to get to work. I'm sorry I can't be there with you tonight. If I haven't already, I hope to meet each of you soon. Thank you so much.
Happy hands, no applause. Thank you. All right, awesome. Let's get into it. This is a nice crowd. Thank you so much, Ms. Haney. This has been a really fascinating race, Sonja and Christine. Thanks so much for being here. I first wanted to paint a little bit of backdrop before we get into the questions. The trio of candidates has gotten praise across the board for policy chops this election. San Francisco Chronicle editor-in-chief Audrey Cooper said you actually brought researched and plausible ideas to the table in your hearing. Longtime San Francisco political observer Randy Shaw called this, quote, one of the most impressive supervisor fields in district elections history. But San Francisco Magazine did say in a recent piece, quote, as in this summer's mayoral race, with little in the way of substantive differences separating the candidates, the election has become more about personality than politics. And as context, the two of you have endorsed each other and asked voters to rank you 1 and 2 on their ballots. But you are your own separate candidates, your own separate people with different backgrounds and potential agendas. So over the next hour or so, I want people to come away with a more informed sort of vision about how you will distinguish yourselves and the way you'll govern District 6. So tonight, each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and each of you will have the opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal if you see fit. I will cut you off with our timekeeper if you go over your time, and I may ask you to clarify some policy issues if you're not speaking in plain English. So let's get started with opening statements. Each of you will have 2 minutes to introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into specific questions. So we'll start with Sonja.
Okay. Is it okay if I stand up?
Sure.
Great. I'll sit down for the rest, I promise. So my name is Sonja Trauss. I'm running for District 6 because we need an effective advocate at City Hall to deal with our district's biggest problems. How many people here live in District 6? Great. Basically everybody. So you are extremely familiar with the district's biggest problem, homelessness. And we can end street homelessness. Hundreds of other American cities have done it with shelter, mental health programs, and affordable housing. We can end open-air drug use with safe injection sites and enforcing the public intoxication laws we already have on the books. We can address open-air drug dealing and property crimes with increased police accountability to the Board of Supervisors and with more effective police staffing like community patrols. And we can make our streets safer from car accidents by increasing enforcement of Don't Block the Box and other traffic laws, widening sidewalks, adding bike and scooter lanes, adding more crosswalks, and more bus lanes. And I already said wider sidewalks, but I'm saying it again because I'm so adamant about it. I have a demonstrated track record on the issue that is the #1 issue in San Francisco, which is housing. 4 years ago, I was a high school math teacher. I wasn't in politics at all. And since then, I've co-founded what is now a national movement, the YIMBY Party, which means Yes in My Backyard. We advocate for all kinds of housing, for all income levels, because we're in a housing shortage. I am the ED of the only nonprofit in California that enforces the Housing Accountability Act. And at the state level, I helped pass a law that makes it easier to sue cities that aren't building their fair share of housing. So as supervisor,
That's it.
As supervisor, I'm proposing to do something very new, which is legalize affordable housing all over the city. You'll hear more about it. I can't wait to tell you. Thanks.
Thanks, Sonja. Christine?
All right, thank you guys for being here tonight. It's so exciting to have so many folks here who are actually from District 6. So this is great. So my name is Christine Johnson, also running for District 6. I grew up in New York City. My mom was a nurse, but we moved 8 times between the ages of when I was 0 to 18 because our rent went up all the time. So I understand the instability that high housing costs can cause even for middle class families. My mom was a nurse who worked 2 jobs. So this is something that has stuck with me my entire life. And it's the reason why I've dedicated my professional career and also almost all of my personal hours to helping make cities more equitable and diverse. I studied engineering at Smith College, and I actually have a husband of one of my classmates in the audience here. And I landed here in 2004 and built a 12-year career in public finance. So I have expertise in how cities can marshal their resources through effective management of their budgets and also through debt. I, very soon after moving here, was appointed to the Hunters Point Shipyard Citizens Advisory Committee. 8 years after that, I was appointed as chair of the OCII Commission, which actually was the successor to redevelopment, which is why we have Mission Bay and Trans Bay, 2 of the 2 new neighborhoods in District 6. And then for almost 4 years, I was on the Planning Commission. It's actually how I met Sonja. I have experience in how to fix our problems. When we talk about housing, yes, we need to do more, we need to build more, we need to make it more affordable, and we need to have the political will to do that. But do you guys know that a lot of the reason that we have empty lots is because we have a rule in the books that says if you get an entitlement, it goes away after 3 years, but only if you have a hearing called a revocation hearing. We've never had one in the history of San Francisco, and we have lots that have been sitting for almost a decade empty because we don't get rid of entitlements. That is the kind of detail-oriented, policy-oriented thinking that I want to bring to the Board of Supervisors, and I'm really excited to answer questions and talk more with you all tonight. So thanks so much.
Happy hands. Thank you. Thanks, Christine. So now let's move into questions. Each of you are going to have 2 minutes to answer and then a 30-second rebuttal. Christine, the first question is going to start with you, and then we'll go with Sonja answering the same question. So I want each of you to imagine you've just been elected District 6 Supervisor, and you've won in convincing fashion. You have a mandate and perhaps a board eager to work with you. What policy are you proposing in week 1? Who would oppose that idea, and how would you navigate that opposition? Christine?
The first thing I want to do is make sure that the government is accountable for the state of our public spaces. In our administrative code, it says that private property owners are responsible for the sidewalks outside of their buildings. I think this is one of the most inequitable policies we have. It is why we have the Gold Coast up in District 2 that's beautiful, you can eat off the sidewalk, and we have not that in District 6. So the number one thing I want to do is change that in the admin code, which would make the government responsible for our public spaces. Who would be partners on it? Almost every supervisor. When I talk to supervisors, when I learned this as a planning commissioner, when I talked to people about it, they were surprised, which is, that's another question about why supervisors don't actually know that, but people were surprised. Who would oppose it? Well, I will tell you, people will have a question about budget, because right now we have a conglomeration of private property operators who pay for their own staff to clean the streets. We have 6 community benefit districts that service District 6 and others around the city. And you know, people would have questions about how we would pay for it. But for me, the question is accountability, and then we can talk about actual tactics after that. So that's the first thing that I would do.
Okay.
Legalize affordable housing all over the city. Speaking of not knowing what's illegal, a lot of people don't think about it this way. Affordable housing has to be apartment housing. That's just the way it is. If you're building something subsidized, the state and the federal government don't subsidize single-family affordable housing projects. It has to be apartments. And in more than 70% of the city, you cannot build apartments. You have to build a single family home or a duplex, or maybe something is already zoned as a church, and so it's hard to get it changed to multifamily. What that means is that all of our affordable housing is built in basically 2 districts. Actually 3. Like more than 90% of it is in District 6, District 10, which is the Bayview, and Hunters Point, and Potrero, and then a little bit of it is built in District 5, which is London Breed's old district. So what this means is that we feel like we're running out of space for affordable housing, but we're not. We can open up the whole rest of the city. The reason that this is so important is that although I'm in support of market rate housing also, and that's how I built my political career, the lack of affordable housing is at the center of our biggest, most pressing problems. When I talk to small business people, they can't hire. When I talk to all kinds of people who live in the district, they're afraid of getting displaced. Older people on fixed incomes, they don't know where they would go if their current situation goes away. And also the state of our streets, right? People are living outside because they can't afford housing, and then that makes the streets dirty and unsafe. The people that would be against this are people who want to preserve neighborhood character on the west side, in the neighborhoods that have not had to build affordable housing. The people that are for it are going to be all of the Eastern supervisors, you guys, and the way that we're going to get the whole city to be for it is by activating renters and people who care about housing security all over the city.
Christine, you guys feel like rebut that?
Rebuttal is a strong word. I think the one thing that I would say is, it's about tactics. I love Sonja's idea. I've actually cribbed her notes sometimes and quoted you, giving you credit. But I strongly believe that this is not something that would be able to get to the Board of Supervisors today or in the near future. I really think that the way that this is going to happen is by ballot measure. Specifically, a charter amendment to amend the term discretion. So that's the thing that's the way that I would do it, and it's just really a question of tactics.
Oh, we can just go back and forth like that?
Then let's cut on that. Yeah, we're going to make this interesting. So.
I mean, it'll get to the Board of Supervisors, called be on the board, and then I'll introduce it. It will take 2 years. I'm not promising anybody it'll take 1 year, it'll take 2 years. It'll be in the newspaper, people will be stressed out. We're going to have a lot of community meetings, but I think it's an important conversation that this city has to have with itself. We talk about affordability, but no supervisors, when it comes down to it, really make the hard choices. And this would be that hard choice, and we have to have that conversation.
Okay, next question. Sonja, we'll start with you and then move to Christine. We've recently passed an $11 billion budget in San Francisco, the largest budget in the city's history, nearly double what it was a decade ago. Help people understand your budget priorities. Name one city agency, office, or department that you want to focus on and how it can use its budget allocation more effectively without necessarily needing more money.
Oh my goodness. The planning department, I think, spends a lot of time holding people's hands through the process of their neighborhood changing. So I've heard from planners and people who work in the planning department that planners are quitting their job because there's higher turnover than they otherwise expected. Because the planners get into planning because they want to build neighborhoods, and what they wind up doing is mediating bitter fights between neighbors over a roof deck. That is not what our public employees are supposed to be doing. There's also, I don't quite understand why more of the submissions when you are building something can't be put in electronically, right? We do have some objective standards, right? The house can only be so high, and the setback is so deep. These are numbers, so you should be able to submit your plans for the thing you're building online. There's also things that maybe shouldn't even need a permit, like getting tables and chairs, restaurants. You shouldn't need a permit for tables and chairs. So I think there's a lot we could slim down in the planning department.
So I think that there's a lot that we need to do with our budget. I want to break down $11 billion for people. Half of that is in enterprise funds. In fact, the planning department is an enterprise department, meaning that their expenses come out of the revenue that they raise and the fees that people pay for permits, and we have other enterprise funds like that. The other half of our budget is general fund. So we have sales tax, we have gross receipts tax, which is, we're transitioning off of payroll tax, we have property tax, and then we have fees, like if you get a parking ticket. That is about $5.6 billion, so about half of $11 billion. Of that general fund, 30% of it is gone before the first budget hearing because we have set-asides that we continually vote for where none of them, in the legislation, when you vote for something that says we're going to set this money aside to pay for something, there is no language nearly ever that says at some point in time we're going to revisit this topic and see if we still need to spend money on this. So we actually have set-asides in our budget that people voted on a generation ago. And I think that's wrong. I think we have locked up nearly $3 billion of our budget in things that may not be priorities today if we really looked at them. And then in addition to that, I would say of our entire general fund, set aside or no, half of it goes to health and human services, right? So this is the reason why I focus on set-asides, because we have lots of overlapping streams of funding, and it's the reason why we have to look at things like Prop C, which is going to add an initial $300 million per year for homelessness services, because we're not able to talk about the full discretionary power of our budget. So $11 billion is not really $11 billion. So the first thing that I want to start the conversation on is sunsetting set-asides. Set-asides should have an expiration date, so that either the voters or the elected officials at the time can really determine whether or not it's something we still need to spend our money on. Sometimes, a lot of times the answer will be yes, but sometimes it will be no. So that would be the big change that I would make.
I realized, actually, that I wanted to fight a little bit also with the premise of this question. Sometimes when people ask me this, I think it's not that our budget is too big, it's that our population is too small. There are a lot of people that want to live in San Francisco. There's a lot of economic activity in San Francisco. There are a lot of people missing from San Francisco. People who grew up here and wanted to stay. People who live in, some other place in the U.S. that want to come here. So it's not such a bad thing to grow your tax base. And if there are things we feel like we want to spend money on and we don't have the budget for, we have potential taxpayers all over the world that want to live here.
Christine, you want to rebut that or expand on your...
Sure. Since public finance is my background, I'll talk about the budget all day. So the last thing that I would say...
30 seconds.
Yeah. The last thing that I would say is there was a Brookings Institute report that basically matched up large cities and said, do your budgets match your economy, like where your money is generated? And San Francisco, where all of our money, was not number one on that list. The big reason is because land value is very expensive here, but a smaller percentage of our actual general fund comes from property tax. So repeal Prop 13, let's get that on the ballot. That's what we need to do, and then we'll have more money for all kinds of fun things like education and housing and fun stuff.
For those at home, the repeal Prop 13 line got a lot of happy hands.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to housing. We've already been talking about housing a lot. We're going to have some specific questions on housing and homelessness. Christine, we'll start with you on this question. Each of you has said, including Mr. Haney, has said the city needs more housing built to address affordability issues. The majority of new housing in the past decade has been constructed right here in District 6, as Sonja pointed out. How specifically do you plan to win support from other supervisors, agencies, and homeowners so more market rate and affordable housing is built across San Francisco and others?
Yes. So one thing that I was surprised to learn as a planning commissioner is despite the stance that Western area supervisors have on housing generally, many of them have secretly asked for area plans for transit corridors in their districts. Like they're looking at Geary, they're looking at it, they're just not really publicizing it. So one of the things that I want to do is make that area planning process a lot easier so it doesn't take 10 years. And then you'll see a lot of supervisors be less scared to try to go through that process to sort of experiment with where can we put more housing. I think that's something that we can do immediately. The other thing I want to do that will impact housing more broadly is I really think we need to reform the inclusionary housing lottery system. It's inequitable, it's unfair, it makes market rate housing more expensive, and it's one of the reasons why we have so many fights about which AMI here and there in different neighborhoods, and I think if we reform that whole system so people felt it was more equitable and fair, you would have supervisors, I think, supporting more development in their neighborhoods. And again, this conversation has changed, and I really want to thank Sonja and the YIMBY movement for doing that. Folks who used to be fine coming to the Planning Commission and saying, I don't want more housing, they now start their statements off but by saying, I believe we need more housing, but, and then they say something awful, right? So, so I want to thank you guys for starting that conversation, and I think there's some concrete ways we could change our process that would make it a lot easier for other supervisors to go along.
Can you say how you're going to do that?
Yeah, so I'll start with the inclusionary housing lottery system because I think that's the biggest change we should make. We have gone down, the inclusionary housing was not always the way that we had affordable housing. That was a law that was passed around 2000, and for 18 years now we have been living in this area of going down the sinkhole of talking about AMIs and what percentages, and not really talking about how to have more fair housing access for everybody. So what I want to do is have a more generalized rental subsidy system, step away from attaching things to new development, and that'll make it more fair for everyone.
Sorry.
Let's talk about politics, because that's what this question is about. How do we get elected officials to say yes to housing, or to say yes to a new zoning that would then allow more housing? It is really, it goes back to the YIMBY Party or any other pro-housing local neighborhood group. Neighbors, people who actually live in all of the districts, have to contact their supervisors, contact each other, and become visible. That is how we make progress. So this is actually one of the reasons, I'll talk about this later, why this race is super important. I'll tell you, especially at the beginning of the race, people thought that it was impossible for Haney to not win. They said, oh, obviously this district is just going to go for the favorite. If I win, especially, but if either one of us wins, then the whole city is going to be on notice that there's something different going on. That the pro-housing individual, the pro-housing idea is ascendant. It will change the tenor totally in this district. And so that is why it is so important. Any of you guys that are on board, that are like, we're in a shortage, we need more housing, please make sure your friends know who the real pro-housing candidates are, because everyone in this race is saying they're a pro-housing candidate, but not everybody in this race is a pro-housing candidate. I'm going to give a little anecdote about how we passed the Affordable Housing Bonus Program. When Katie Tang told me this, she said when she went around the first time and they had neighborhood meetings in the outer Sunset and even in the Richmond and the inner Sunset, everybody that came to the meetings was totally against it. They said this is going to ruin our lives. Then the second year when they went around, there were people that were totally against it, but every meeting had like 4 or 5 people who said, this might not be such a bad thing. And those were people who had started, or pro-housing people who had started organizing in that neighborhood. And that was enough to give her and the rest of the supervisors the permission to pass this real upzoning.
And just Katie Tang, supervisor from the Sunset, inclusionary housing is the affordable housing for low-income people tied to the construction of market rate housing. Yes. Do you have anything you want to sort of rebut, Sonja, or expand upon?
No rebuttal, and we are 2 different people, so I'm going to try not to say this too much because we're different people, and I do want people to know why we have separate platforms. But I agree.
Christine, with your 30 seconds, can you say specifically how you're going to navigate those politics if you're a supervisor?
Yes, I definitely agree with Sonja that one of us winning would change the tenor around creating housing in the entire city. No longer would people be able to say no and end the conversation and nobody says anything. We would have a bully pulpit and it would work. I think we would be able to really push the conversation around more housing citywide. I think we've got actually some candidates in District 4 and some of those other races that would be amenable to really talking about transit-oriented development. And we have, frankly, a state delegation that has been very successful in getting statewide legislation done. So I think we'd be able to work with them really successfully.
Sorry, man, 30 seconds.
That's good.
Okay, next question. Sonja, we're going to start with you. San Francisco's homeless count has generally risen over the past decade in the face of national declines. Taking a look at other cities across the country and the world, name one innovative thing that San Francisco can do to to meaningfully address the homelessness crisis?
Are you talking about our street homelessness? Because I thought our overall homelessness was flat when other places were going up.
This is from the City Economist report.
So this is a trick question because there's the thing to do about homelessness isn't innovative. It's shelter. Shelter. It's very straightforward. If someone is without shelter, give them shelter and then they will have it. It's that simple. The cities in the United States where 98% of people who are homeless are sheltered, what characterizes them is one, they have more shelter. We only have shelter for 40% of people that need it. In places where people live inside, they have a little more shelter than they need, so there's always an empty shelter bed. The other thing is there's better coordination amongst the nonprofits that serve the community that is experiencing homelessness. And we're about to get that. We have something called the Coordinated Entry System, and it's going to come online starting in November, and it's very, very exciting. It means that people that receive services only have to really sign up once, and then when they go to different nonprofits, their record, will follow them. And we also are going to get much better data, so we'll be able to tell what each nonprofit is doing and how it's working. So that's very, very exciting, but we need the political support to build the shelter because a lot of the conversation about homelessness here in San Francisco is people on the one hand saying, well, if you give people shelter and you give them programs, then they're just going to want to be homeless and they're going to come here from other places. And the implication is that if you don't give people shelter, then homelessness will go away. I think that we can see that that does not work, right? If it works to not give people shelter and they'll somehow figure something out, then we wouldn't have homelessness right now. So we need shelter and we need the political will to do it.
Christine?
Yes, thanks. So I'd actually like to move quickly past the shelter to discussion to talking about where are people going to lay their heads more permanently. I'm very optimistic about the conversation around shelter, quite frankly, because the sad instance of we have neighborhoods in San Francisco where people have never in their lives seen a tent on their street. They've owned their home for decades, and now there are people living in tents on the corner down the street from their home that they've owned for decades. So I really think that we are going to be able to have an altered conversation in the next year about having geographic equity, meaning shelter and navigation centers in every neighborhood, in every district. We've both been endorsed by Mayor London Breed, who will be pushing that conversation. So I think we're going to see that. So as a supervisor, I want to talk about where are they going to go? Because we still have an epidemic of people being turned back out onto the street, which actually makes it harder if they continue to experience homelessness to get them in next time, because they're like, I was here, and now I'm back on the street and nothing's happening. So I want to revamp the Moving On program so that people who have been in SROs for a long time or single room occupancy hotels, where it's basically like group housing, they don't want to be there anymore, they want to live more independently. We can revamp a program called Moving On, which was kind of unsuccessful in its first outing, so that people can move on, so we can open up SROs for people who are formerly homeless. And frankly, I am okay with starting the conversation of partnering with our other Bay Area cities and counties on where people are going to live. Santa Clara County issued a $1 billion bond to build supportive housing for formerly homeless and disabled people in 2016. I'm pretty sure that they would take some money from San Francisco to help fill out some of their financial plan in exchange for some partnership on putting roofs over heads. We've also got communities that are rebuilding from the ashes of fires. I think they take some money for some new roads to house some people. So I think we can have a broader conversation, and people will be more amenable to it now.
Sorry, I'm not sure about that.
We already send people to other parts of the Bay Area, which is fine, it's good. And we send people to parts all over the United States. It's called the Going Home program or something. Yeah, Homeward Bound, right. It's 40% of the people that go in a navigation center actually get a bus ticket to somewhere else in the U.S. The permanent, yes, after shelter, permanently, legalize affordable housing all over the city. We will have space for 5 times as much housing as we have now. It is true that it's hard and it might not work, but guess what definitely won't work? Not trying. And because people are seeing homelessness all over the city, it might be now might be the time that it could happen.
Christine?
Yes. Although the Homeward Bound program, for people who don't know what it is, it works for people who are able to connect with a network they have, or family or friends. And there's a lot of folks who don't have that, particularly our older folks population who are on the street. But yes.
Let's now talk about how to fund homelessness services such as shelters and mental health services. Voters will of course decide this November on Proposition C. It was put on the ballot by signature to generate up to $300 million annually, funded by a tax increase on large San Francisco businesses. If passed, Prop C would be the largest tax increase in San Francisco history, and it could also push some jobs out of the city, according to a city economist report today. But there are potential benefits, this report says, including reducing homelessness and improving health outcomes. So, how will each of you be voting on Prop C and why? Christine, we'll start with you.
So I'm supportive of Prop C, and the reason is because I'm also supportive of sunsetting set-aside. So in about 10 years, I'm hoping that it'll go away and we can decide whether or not it's necessary anymore. I think, again, the biggest thing we need to do is unlock what we, $3.6 billion in our budget that is spoken for before we ever have the first hearing. Then we wouldn't need any more Prop Cs. That's how I feel. That said, right now, we're talking about building navigation centers on Caltrans land, so that's all the land under 101, 280, 80. We need to stand those up in the next 6 months to a year, and I think that this will help us get there. In terms of the question about jobs, I do want to address that a little bit. We've already seen middle-class jobs leaving San Francisco all over, but particularly in the tech industry. We have call centers and sales and other middle-income jobs moving to Austin, moving to Arizona, moving to Las Vegas, moving to other places. So that is already happening. I want to make sure that we do make sure that industry can be successful in San Francisco, and there are lots of maneuvers that I think we can do. But for now, I'm supporting Prop C. We need those resources, and then we can be restructuring our entire budget. So we don't need to have any more Prop Cs at a later time.
Yeah, I'm yes on C. I'm really excited about it. The spending plan was written by Jeff Kaczynski, who's currently the head of homelessness and supportive housing. I think it's really ambitious. They want to build 4,000 affordable units. The difference would be huge. Guys, we would be living in a different city. Also, I agree that Prop C won't be permanent because it's part of the payroll and gross receipts tax, which has to get reorganized anyway in the next 8 years. So it's not the case that this tax is going to last forever. I think that we're losing jobs and people due to homelessness and due to high housing costs. Another exciting thing about Prop C, potentially it creates another source of revenue that would go into the Housing Trust Fund. So that's something that we need for other policy reasons. I think it's really ambitious, and I think it would help us a lot.
Just primer for navigation centers mentioned, those are different than traditional shelters in that they have fewer barriers to entry and have intensive case management.
Sorry, I had one more thing on that, and I had more time left over. So another place to find money to pay for homeless services is actually redirecting from Department of Public Works. Mohammed Nuru says that he thinks he spends, or DPW spends, $50 million a year just cleaning up on things related to homelessness. $50 million just for homelessness. In order to house all of the unsheltered people, to shelter the unsheltered people we have now, that would be $40 million a year. So we're already spending the money, but we're spending it in a ridiculous way, frankly.
Christine, I wanted to focus sort of your 30-second response on sort of what if you can't get the sunset, sort of get the set-aside sunsetted? Is that sort of an easy sort of response to the Prop C question? This will work as long as we can do this. What if you can't?
No, I'm supportive of Prop C. We need those funds. I do believe it's ambitious. We need to have more accountability across our entire stream of spending on nonprofits and other health and human services organizations. But that is separate from the question of whether or not Prop C is a good or a bad idea. I think it's a great idea. And then I just always want to stick in that last major point of we just need to revamp our entire budget and how we think about our resources. But that's separate from my support for Prop C.
Sorry, ma'am, I'll use your 30 seconds.
We're going to have, I think, another ballot measure about the gross receipts tax, just FYI, in the future. And that is going to cover doing something. Because this is a funny thing about Prop C. If it works, we don't need it anymore. Maybe I already said that. It's going to be great, you guys.
Can you say what that means? Can you expand upon that a little bit?
If we make this huge investment in shelter and housing, then we won't need to spend so much money on people who are living without housing.
Oh, sorry, can I have a rebuttal on that one? No, I'm sorry.
No, sorry.
I'm sorry.
You used it, sorry.
It's just that most of the funding is on supportive housing, which is less permanent funding. Like, people need funding into the future for the support services. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. One demerit. Okay, so the next question we're going to start with Sonja. This is on tech growth and culture, given where we are. This will be fun. Supervisors this year proposed a ban on employee cafeterias in new San Francisco office buildings, hoping to send employees out to local restaurants. While the ban is intended to curb any new future cafeterias, any current employers, like Lyft, moving to new spaces would be subject to this ban. This set off a debate on tech companies and employees' contributions to civic life and the development of small businesses in the city. So this is a two-part question. First part is, do you support this ban as it is currently proposed, yes or no? The second part of the question is, what specific ideas do you have to bridge the perceived cultural gap between tech companies and their employees and other residents of the city?
No, I don't support the ban. Also, I want to congratulate everybody who tweeted about the ban or posted about it. Who here tweeted angrily about the ban? What? Not that many, I'm amazed. Listen, because it was a firestorm. City Hall, Aaron Peskin's office, they were shocked. I was shocked. I was on Twitter, I saw so many people just up in arms, people all over the country, and that killed the ban. So if anybody's wondering if Twitter activism is a thing, actually, I think it is, because it was just embarrassing for the people that put our post it. I was very surprised at the backlash. When the ban came out, I have to admit, I was like, oh yeah. I just wasn't surprised to see it. It's something that the Restaurant Association has been asking for. When I talked to people, to tech workers or even not tech workers, people said that the real barrier to going out to eating lunch, it's not so much that you don't have to do it because you have a cafeteria, it's you don't want to go out there because the street situation is terrible. So it's a little like the city, it's a little like, it's the wrong problem. We really have to take care of this, of the open air drug use and homelessness and all this kind of thing, because that's what's getting in the way of people really walking around and meeting each other and all this kind of thing. As far as integrating tech workers into San Francisco, I think it's kind of a myth. Not all tech workers are from somewhere else. There's a lot of tech workers that are from here. The political activity that I have been doing from day one has been telling everyone that lives here that since you live here, since you have an address here, your opinion here matters. Because there really is a mini culture war. There's the progressive bloc is very hostile, and they are making up a lot of conflict. They are telling people, that you don't belong here, you haven't been here long enough, you're in the wrong kind of job, and I thoroughly disagree with that. And I look forward to representing everybody in District 6.
Thank you. Christine?
Cafeteria ban is like the death of democracy. I mean, honestly, it is the thing that makes people not have faith in city government. It is the thing that makes people forget what a supervisor can actually do if they're focused on the right problems. A supervisor can do a lot of things. You got your budget vote, you can propose legislation, there's a lot of things you can do, and the cafeteria ban is a total waste of that effort. The way that you would actually attack the problem is to make it easier for small and middle-sized businesses to open and be successful in San Francisco, because those are the people who have middle-class jobs and they support other small and mid-sized businesses. If you have that ecosystem going, who cares if some of the larger companies have cafeterias? We wouldn't even notice it. The other thing we need to do is really look at our planning code and make sure that our commercial quarters can be successful. If you look at Mid-Market Street, which is where some of this ire is focused, many of those retail spaces are too big and can't be subdivided, so it makes it challenging for restaurants to open. So there's a lot of things we can do other than just banning cafeterias. In terms of the culture war, I really just want to make sure that we are creating community. If we have safe, clean streets, and we have vibrant commercial corridors, people will be going out. They will feel connected to their communities, and then they'll just be neighbors. Maybe I'm biased because I've spent 14 years in District 6, and so I've been to the bars. I've been to the, I grew up in District 6 with meeting people who this was their first stop in the city. So I don't think anything about it, and I think we can make the rest of the city that way.
With your 30 seconds, oh, you done what you had?
Oh, yes.
Made that mistake. For your remaining 30 seconds for rebuttal, I actually want each of you to discuss one idea you have on revitalizing retail vacancy issues, particularly in this district that have been glaring lately. So.
First, I want to point out that the cafeteria ban was Aaron Peskin's idea, and Aaron Peskin endorsed our opponent, Matt Haney. So, you know that much more. Revitalizing commercial corridors. We do have a big problem. So there's the big developers, they have to put in retail. They do the bare minimum. This is actually something Christine talked about another time. The city makes it very hard to break those spaces up. Generally, there's just a big gap. The landlords don't want to pay to update the space to make it usable, and the small business can't pay. So we have to close that gap. Whether closing that gap means new different regulations so that the renovation doesn't cost as much, or maybe something from the city to help close the gap.
Steve.
Yes, so I talked about this a little bit. I think we need to change our planning and building code to make it easier to subdivide spaces. You know, there are not too many 100 and 150 seat restaurants that are doing well these days. And when you have a space that's 15,000 feet, 20,000 square feet, that's the size, and it's too big. That's why a lot of mid-market is empty. Those spaces are too big. So that's the first thing. I also believe in a graduated vacancy tax to get some of these spaces filled. You know, the retail sector is changing. It is no longer the case that if you open a brick and mortar, you're signing a 15-year lease. But yet, we have some property owners who that's what they want, or they're willing to let it sit empty. So we need to be changing our laws so that there is a carrot and a stick to having spaces empty, particularly in our newer neighborhoods, like Mission Bay, where a lot of the spaces are newer and they're more expensive, and tenant improvements are a little bit more expensive. So those are the two changes I'd want to do, and then there's a lot of little smaller things.
Christine, this first question starts with you. We're now going to have a couple questions on transportation. Again, fitting for this room. So autonomous vehicles, whether they hit the city streets in 2, 5, 20, 30 years, have the potential to transform urban life. Experts debate the utopian versus dystopian visions for autonomous vehicles, such as their potential to improve road safety or increase or decrease traffic congestion. What steps, if any, should the city be taking to prepare for the arrival of autonomous vehicles in the next couple of years? Christine?
Okay, so this is a really challenging question, and unfortunately I think many of you are going to be highly disappointed with my answer. I think that we need to wait and see and closely partner with the industry on what's going to happen. If you would have asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have said, oh, well, I guess we need to start setting aside billions of dollars so that we can have sensors in our roads, and so that we have signs, signage that is different, and we have red light cameras, and we have lots of different things. But then LiDAR happened, which is a technology that is really being integrated into autonomous vehicles to make them not need any of that stuff, basically make them more like humans. So, okay, I guess we don't need that. In a few years ago, if you'd asked me this question, I'd say, well, we're going to have these things zipping all around like the Jetsons and driving around empty. But now we have companies like Lyft and Uber that have shown that people will give up their cars to be able to share. People don't want to own vehicles. They don't want to own lots of things. And so I really think that the answer is going to change over the next few years. We kind of need to really just be in iteration mode. And be consistently talking about what the public investment will be that will be necessary. But I'm excited for it. I think there is a way to do it where it gets us to Vision Zero, decrease in traffic fatalities. It is better for our city. It is better for the environment. But we have to figure out what that means.
Autonomous cars are still cars. And my goal for transportation and infrastructure renovation is to center it around humans. around the kind of design that makes it easy for people to walk from one place to another, bike, or scoot, so that we're not reliant on this kind of mid-century notion that we have to get in cars to get around. The use that I'm looking forward to for autonomous vehicles, I think that autonomous vehicles are actually, it's not really going to replace or augment personal cars. It's going to be more something that Muni uses, right? It's going to be about autonomous buses, maybe fixed routes, and maybe variable routes. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but I actually don't think that we have to do anything particularly special, because the real question is going to be about, are we designing cities for humans or are we designing cities for cars? And I'm already on the cities for humans side.
Christine, do you want to address that?
Just a quick rebuttal on that. Like I said, people think of a car as a car where there's 4 seats in the steering wheel or 5 seats or whatever. But it may be the case that autonomous vehicles look nothing like a car looks today, and people will get used to that. It may be the case that autonomous vehicles are about carrying your stuff, not you. And if people are riding scooters and shared bikes everywhere, it's about sort of transporting those from one place to another. So, like I said, I think there's so many things that are changing about the culture, how we get around, as well as the technology around autonomous vehicles. So it's a really tough question to answer right now, but I'm excited to see it. And I also believe in having human-centered streets and sidewalks, and so hopefully that's the future we're moving towards.
Sonja?
Oh.
Okay, I just want to throw in a quick 30-second question here, because you both talked about sort of making streets more livable for pedestrians and cyclists and whatnot. Specific plans, how do you make Soma a more scooter, bike, pedestrian-friendly city? A minute for each of you on that question. Specific plans on that goal. We'll start with Sonja.
I want timed lights. And in order to get timed lights, you need basically all one-way streets. And in order to have one-way streets that are safe, they need to be only 1 or 2 lanes wide. So our 4-lane wide streets, the goal is 2 lanes wide. Our 2-lane wide streets, 1 lane wide. And then all that extra room will be bus red lanes, scooters, bikes, wider sidewalks, and parklets. That's the vision.
Christine.
Okay, so I think it's going to be traffic engineer battle time. I'm not one of those, but I actually believe we need more 2-way streets. I believe if Folsom and Howard were 2 ways, they would be safer. We wouldn't have had, for example, we had a death along, I think that was Howard and 9th just the other day. Cars would be able to move slower. We could get those red light cameras, we could have more bike lanes, and the businesses on either side of the street would see more pedestrian traffic from other neighborhoods. So that's the change that I would like to make, but I'm highly open to the traffic engineers battling it out and see which one actually succeeds in the goal of making streets safer and making people get around better.
Okay. Do you want to?
Yes. Pitches for all one-way streets. And again, I really want to be clear, one-way streets, they have to become narrower. I'm not talking about making 6th Street 4 lanes of traffic in one direction, okay? I'm talking about making 6th Street 2 lanes of traffic in one direction, or less. It's already 4 lanes in 2 directions. Anyway, one-way streets means you never have to make a left turn against traffic ever again. And when you're crossing the street, whether on a bike or walking, you don't have to look both ways. You only have to look one way. Think about how much scarier it is to cross 6th Street than it is 7th Street.
Christine, you want to know about that? 30 seconds.
No, but I do think we need more bike lanes, protected bike lanes, and then that's how we're going to have more parity with scooters, those unit-wheel things, bikes, and other ways of getting around. So I think we should do that as well.
Okay. Speaking of scooters, Sonja, we'll start with you on this question. So the launch, subsequent crackdown, and then permitting process of electric scooter rentals in San Francisco has been a challenging issue, to say the least. 2 companies, Scoot and Skip, will launch 625 scooters each in San Francisco next month. But some claim that the permitting process shut out other companies and that the process and criteria for permitting was unfair. Do you agree with the city's current approach to permitting emerging technologies like scooters, dogless bikes, things like that?
Yeah, I think it's a real shame that the scooter companies felt like they had to do this gonzo thing. You know, they said that if they hadn't just done it and gotten people to love the scooters, if they had asked permission, then they never would have gotten the scooters out. And I agree with them. I think that that is true. And I think that's an example of how badly our government is functioning in some way. So now we have this other process, and I know that I don't want to, like, I guess, comment on the laws. They might sue the city because they abuse their discretion. I've definitely seen the city abuse its discretion other times, so could be true. I do think in the long run we probably are going to need more scooters and more bikes. All of these caps mean that all the scooters are only kind of in the east side of the city, and for those of us that live in the east side of the city, that's good. But there are people that live on the west side that also want to be able to use the scooters and the bikes. So we're going to just need more. The other thing I want to do a real quick plug for is more bike racks. Now that we have Lime bikes everywhere and jump bikes, we need more bike racks. So this whole thing, yeah, it's very dysfunctional. We have to get some more smarter people on board. Not just us, but Nick Josefowitz and Trevor McNeil and Theo Ellington. How about?
Yes, so another death democracy move. I believe, I actually have an open question as to how we could have avoided this situation. So going back to the land when we had no scooters, like what's the best process for them to just say, now we want to start this new thing? I'll be honest and say, I don't believe the answer should be no, but I'm thinking about how do we do that in the future. But we are where we are. I think we need to move to being more outcomes oriented. I don't know why we care how many companies are in San Francisco. It should be about, are they on Clipper so that they're equitable and everyone has access to them? Do they have places to be so they're not just like strewn in the middle of the sidewalk? And do we have rules around where they're ridden? I don't believe they should be ridden on the sidewalks, so that they're ridden in the bike lanes and it's safe and people can use them. We should spend our time on that sort of structuring, not on we don't like you because you're this certain company. It's just the wrong way of spending our energy. And again, I think it makes people lose faith in what the supervisors and what the mayor can actually do if they put their attention on the right things.
You're about that.
I mean, I would agree, we need rapid deployment of places for the scooters to go, because I do not believe the scooters should be on the sidewalk. I also understand why people who ride scooters don't want to be on the sidewalk. And a lot of our bike lanes, even the new ones, there's a new one on 8th Street, is already congested. We can have rapid deployment, by the way. If you've seen other cities, they do a lot with paint and planters. So we can take back our streets from cars as quickly, really, as we have the political will for.
Sure. Yes. Although I do think that it's not just political will, but we also have to look at our capital plan. Bike lanes and other street furniture and infrastructure investments to support transit and transportation are in our citywide capital plan. And right now we have a $3.2 billion gap in our capital plan of things we want to do versus money we have. And that's a real challenge that we're going to need to make to get the mode share that we want. So I would actually expand it out beyond the political will to say we still need to do a lot of work around our finances to be able to pay for some of this stuff.
Well, I want to go on to the next question, and we'll start. What did we start last time? We'll start with Christine this time, because we've had a lot in the news recently. There's been a lot of controversy related to SF.citi and Uni. Sort of having slowdowns in service. You've had this week, of course, Transit Week, structural issues with transit centers. There is seems to be low public confidence that is building in public transit. Meanwhile, you have the proliferation of private transit solutions, ride-hailing, scooters, shared bikes. Where will you be putting most of your effort as supervisor? Will you be addressing the expansion of the private services or addressing needs for public transit in terms of your time in office? Where do you see sort of most of your time being spent?
I see most of my time being spent on public transit, and the reason is because I think that we have limited means of, really truly limited means of being able to force private companies to provide the level of service that a public service has to offer, right? So in an ideal world, private scooter companies and TNCs like Uber, Lyft, and Chariot, we would have some law that says you must equally serve all neighborhoods, don't care if you lose money, good luck with that. Unfortunately, I don't think that we really can do that. I don't think that's realistic, even if you're of the mindset that that is something that you would want to do. What you can do that with is public transit. You can make sure that all neighborhoods are serviced equally. You can have more strategy around getting more subways and connecting more of our trains and having more buses, and you can have that public conversation that is really challenging when you're working with private corporations that have boards of directors and investors that want their money back. And so I want to focus my energies on the capital planning for our public transportation system, because that's what we have the most control over, frankly, in the long run.
Well, the MTA is supposed to be spending all its time on making the buses run. One idea I have heard is that perhaps the head of the MTA, that position, that person has a contract, and that contractor maybe should have some performance metrics. You know, if on-time rate falls below something, then there is a penalty. Right now, there's no performance metrics at all. I think that what I would spend most of my time on is changing the physical infrastructure that I've already spoken about, making the sidewalks wider, turning space over to cars and scooters. I'm glad that you asked it like that. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but it really is a priority for me to change the infrastructure, because the infrastructure, once you start with that, it will influence so deeply the way people decide to move around the city. I mean, right now, a quarter of the cars downtown are Uber or Lyfts. A quarter. It's a lot of congestion. Sorry, close your eyes, your ears. But those are the trips that if we made it easy to scoot or walk or bike, people would get out of their cars, and that's such an important goal.
Christine, do you want to go?
No real rebuttal. I will just say, again, I really do think this comes down to a money issue. Going back to the Transbay Terminal that has a man-made cave under it and apparently 2 cracked steel beams. The way that we're really going to change the regional structure of transit is getting Caltrain and high-speed rail to the Transbay Terminal. So you talk about infrastructure, that needs to happen. We need a second Transbay crossing so that we can really create a loop around the Bay Area. We need to make sure that we can close our $3.2 billion capital planning gap so that if anyone's ever been on the K or T or N and see those new trains, we're supposed to buy like 2 or 3 times as many, but we can't. So we really need to figure out like where's our money going to come from so that we can do some of these things. For a lot of these ideas, they are written down somewhere. We just don't have money for them.
Where will it come from?
Fantastic question.
In 10
Again,
seconds.
yeah. Again, I think reforming general fund will be a part of it. I think repealing Prop 13 so that more of our property tax dollars come to San Francisco and we can talk about what to do with them will be a big change. And then we might need more RM3s, which is a regional transit measure that passed in June. We might need 1 or 2 more of those.
Sorry.
Oh, and where the money comes from? So you guys maybe have heard that BART can now develop its own land. Wouldn't it be exciting for some of our transit agencies to develop its own land, to have non-tax, non-fare box sources of revenue? Can be done. Actually, MTA already has a hotel. I think that Hotel Via is on MTA land. They're going to do another one. This is something that I would really want to encourage the MTA to do, is start generating income from its own land. And then I kind of want to make Muni free. So that's a way of spending money. I know this was a earning money question, but I had to put that in there.
We're going to need audience. Great. Okay. Who knows what this will be? Okay. Who started last time? Yeah. We'll start with Sonja. As you can imagine, we received many questions asking the candidates how they plan to address the homeless issue in D6 and throughout San Francisco. There are various paths we can take in this discussion, but I want to specifically focus on mental health. How do you plan to improve the quality and availability of mental health treatment in the city? And what are your views on SB 1045, the conservatorship expansion that was recently signed by Governor Brown, and how will you ensure that it is effectively implemented? Sonja, so improving the quality and availability of mental health treatment and your views on SB 1045.
This is why we really do need Prop C. We actually have quite a few very high quality, very effective programs that are very unevenly applied. So in District 6, there's a shelter on Polk Street called the Next Door Shelter, and if anybody has ever been around there, That shelter is run by ECS, which is a perfectly capable provider, but the contract for that shelter is just staff. There are no caseworkers, no doctors, no psychiatrists, nothing. And ECS doesn't want to run it that way. That's what the contract says. That's ridiculous. So people need a caseworker at least. And each caseworker has 25 clients. I think that that's probably too many. So these are things that cost money, but I think that these are investments that are worth it. We used to have about 6 detox centers in Soma and the Tenderloin, and now there's only 1. The other 5 were all displaced. They were just regular nonprofits. Prices went up and they were displaced. That's crazy because the detox centers, people want to go, they are over full. You know, when people want to detox, when they want to get off of drugs, which is a type of mental health issue, that's why I'm talking about it here. And we don't even have room for them. We're not even meeting them where they are. It's ridiculous. I spoke to a guy that works in one of the mental health lockdowns, is how he describes it. It's one of the places that you go when you are under conservatorship. So I am in support of expanding conservatorship. But he described some very frustrating situations because we, as the state, can take away people's right to leave the mental health lockdown. But once you're there, he can't make people take a shower. He can't make them go to meetings. He can't make them take advantage of any of the things that are on offer. He can't even offer them an inducement. So what he wanted to be able to do was say, hey, if you take a shower, if you go to a meeting, I'm going to let you smoke a cigarette. He couldn't because of the agreement with the neighbors. They weren't allowed outside at all. You know, so we have these things that are like kind of functional but not quite functional. So it's a matter of being in touch with people that actually work there and making sure that when we do our contracts, we do it in a smart way. And we have the money to pay for it.
Christine?
So I want to talk about mental health services a little bit. You know, I think Sonja might have touched on this a little bit. We have a major issue in the city where we don't have any real outcomes around mental health services. Like, what is the point? Is it to make sure that people exit to supportive housing? Is it to reduce emergency room visits? Is it to reduce stays in beds in like emergency mental health services, like when we have like the 55 beds that we open in St. Mary's? Like I've actually started asking this question and I haven't gotten really good answers on what are we actually trying to accomplish. I think there's like the visible thing of, you know, helping people who need help or are on the street, but there's a lot of folks who need mental health issues, who need mental health help, who aren't the ones who you see sort of visibly on our streets. So the first thing that I want to do is make sure that we have real outcomes around how are we trying to service people and what do we want to do for mental health care long term. And that will guide how we appropriate our resources, whether we need more detox beds. Maybe 55 beds at St. Mary's isn't enough, right? So I think we need to have that broader conversation. When it comes to SB 1045, I am a huge proponent of it. I have families members of mine who've experienced mental health illness and they have been on lifelong medication and had various breaks in taking medication and things happen. So I'm a believer in this. And the one thing that I want to make sure that we do is the largest mental health care facility right now is our county jail. So I want to make sure that when people are already in that situation where their civil rights have been taken, that they are taken care of, even though we have this conservatorship law and that their rights are maintained. So that's something that I'll definitely be making sure that we do, that we have the staffing for it, that we have the accountability, the oversight, and the enough place where people can raise their hand and say, you know, this isn't going the right way.
Okay, do you want me to start a second? This is our other audience question. What does it mean to be a good neighbor for tech companies in the district? Specifically, what should they be doing or not doing?
I guess I have to go first.
No, you took first last time.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh, no, you didn't, sorry. Yes.
I think, yeah. Okay, so first of all, I want everyone to like take a deep breath and thank you guys for being here. I know this has been a very like wonky conversation where we're like wah wah wah, codes and budget and blah blah blah. But that's what it takes. That's what good supervisor candidates do, and that's what good supervisors do. Like they talk about wah 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 stuff. So good neighbors. You know, I really think it's about thinking. How are not just your business as a service, as the things that you're offering going to be for community, or literally the people around you in the neighborhoods, but how are you supporting your employees? Some of whom are coming from the Bay Area, others who are coming from other places. How are you supporting them being part of community? How are you making sure that, they're not just feeling like Lyft is all of San Francisco that they know, but they actually know their neighborhoods, right? And so doing things like advertising community service, making sure that people know about ways to get involved in public service. I mean, these are things that I feel like some of the companies could do because they are getting so many newcomers who are coming from other parts, and all they know of San Francisco is their teammates and maybe other people in the building. I experienced this firsthand when I moved to San Francisco. I worked in finance for 2 years, and I worked like 100 hours a week, and I didn't know anybody but the two people in the cubicles next to me until I decided to start running triathlons to meet other people. And I think there are things that my company could have done to make it easier for me to feel a little bit more closer to connected to community sooner after I came here. So I think that's one big thing.
Support Prop C. And I'm serious. Prop C, it's really important, I think, for tech companies to come out for it, for sf.citi to come out for it, in favor of it. The other thing is diversity in hiring. Publish your numbers. I know nobody wants to publish their numbers, but publish your numbers so that we can see. And then do blind hiring. I was shocked. I mean, maybe some tech companies do it, but I was very surprised at how many people I talked to didn't even know what that is. So what that means, because people are prejudiced. They're not just prejudiced based on race or gender, but even your name. So when you're hiring and you're taking in resumes, wipe the name from the resume and wait as long as possible before you actually meet the person in person. Do everything you can without knowing anything about the sound of their voice or the way they look or anything. And I guarantee you that will change your diversity numbers. It will get a more diverse working base. That's really what I'm imploring tech companies to do.
Is there a way to get companies, just in your 30-second response, particularly more involved in the diversity of this district? We're in a tech company right now, but a lot of people that are going to be, obviously this will be the public, but a lot of people have lived in this district for generations. Is there any way to bridge that gap?
Local hiring. So yes, we can do things around, certainly, blind hiring. I agree with that. There are ways to publish anything, nothing measured, nothing gained, right? So I believe in in having statistics. But just this morning, I was speaking at Code Tenderloin, which is an Office of Economic and Workforce Development program, and everybody in there was a working parent, person of color, who all have the skill set to work at any of these companies. So partner there. Hire the person who's lived in the Tenderloin, who's been here for generations before you look at the person who's flying from halfway across the country to take that entry-level job, right? We have people who are right here, and that's what I would say. Tell people to go to Piano Fight in the Tenderloin and network to get people to work at their companies, not just some beauty bar in the Mission or wherever the kids go these days, right? They find those people. So thank you. Sorry, Cory.
Anything to add to that?
I guess I just have like a few little things. I mean, one big thing is register to vote, get involved in local political clubs, don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't be involved in anything, spend money on the arts, and don't LSF people or do owner move-in evictions. This is something that I'm amazed at. I'm not saying this overlaps with tech a lot, but every now and then we do see in the paper somebody that is associated with tech buys a house and LSS people. Just don't do that. If you buy something and there are tenants, don't buy that thing. It's super easy.
I think we're going to...
Housekeeping.
Housekeeping.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
All right. We on? Okay. Well, we are right on time at 7:59. Okay, so we saved 1 minute. So I just wanted to thank everybody for coming out, thank Lyft and Hustle, and let everybody know that there is still food and drinks in the back for a little while. Now we can actually open up some applause. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Sonja. And thank you, Cory, for moderating. Over here in the corner, everybody.
Alright, guys, sign up to volunteer because I know you're all convinced, you're like, yeah, I'm putting Sonja on Christine too, or Christine on Sonja too, but that's not enough. You can't just sit around and think we'll win on our own. You have to tell your friends, post on Facebook, because if one of us doesn't win, it's going to be just the same thing as we have now for another 8 years. Our opponent is on the school board, he's trying to get to the Board of Supervisors, and that's what Jane did, and she left us the last 3 years.
And phone bank.
Yeah, phone bank, not yours.